Welcome back to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation.
Today, we're looking at a case that, even more than a decade later, still feels incredibly raw. It's a disappearance of Bryce Laspisa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a strange one because it's not a case defined by a lack of evidence. It's almost the opposite. There's an abundance of these really confusing, contradictory, and just deeply tragic clues.
That really is the crux of it. I mean, when we look at the sources, the police reports, all the interviews with his family, the forensic work, you see this clear picture of a young man who was on a trajectory toward a serious crisis.
Absolutely.
And the physical evidence, that's where it starts. The morning of August 30th, 2013, near Castaic Lake in California, the first thing they find confirms the violence of it all.
Mm-hmm.
His SUV, a 2003 Toyota Highlander, is just wrecked.
Completely overturned. It had tumbled about 25 feet down an embankment. I mean, the vehicle itself tells this undeniable story of trauma.
But the human element is gone.
Yeah.
Just silence. And that's what makes this so maddening. Bryce Laspisa was seen, he was interviewed, people confirmed he was on the road just hours before that car was found.
Empty.
This isn't just someone who wandered off. This feels like the immediate aftermath of a very intentional act.
And the timeline there is so critical. I mean, the final confirmed communication is probably one of the most haunting details in the whole file.
It really is. At 2:08 in the morning, on August 30th, he calls his mom, Karen.
Uh-huh.
And he tells her he's just too tired to keep driving. He's going to pull over and get some sleep. And he was so agonizingly close to home, only about 90 minutes away from Laguna Niguel.
90 minutes. And then the clock just runs out. A little after that call, by 5:30 a.m., so, it's about 3 hours later, a maintenance crew finds the car.
Bryce is gone.
And maybe the most critical detail of all, his life is still inside that car. His wallet, his phone, his laptop, all left behind.
Yeah.
It just suggests this calculated jettisoning of his entire identity. It's such a powerful indicator of what might have been going through his head in those last few hours.
Which really sets the stage for what we need to do today. We have to look at that wreck, that violent act, not as the beginning of the story, but as the final stop on this really chaotic 30-hour journey.
A journey that was fueled by a huge internal crisis. He was obviously struggling to move forward with his life, or maybe
We'll be determined to just stop it entirely.
And what's so fascinating is that all these strange public encounters he had right before the crash, with the mechanic, with law enforcement, they paradoxically make the case both easier to trace and so much harder to solve.
Right. They confirm his mental state was getting worse, but none of them were enough to stop what eventually happened near Castaic Lake.
Exactly.
So to really understand the crash and everything that came after, we have to go back. We have to look at the psychological ground zero, which seems to be the 2 weeks right before August 27th, 2013.
We have to start with who Bryce was and just how fast he spiraled.
So give us the basics. Who was Bryce Laspisa?
He was 19 years old, about 5'11", very distinct red hair, green eyes. He was studying graphic and industrial design up at Sierra College in Rocklin, California.
And by all accounts, he was, a pretty normal kid, artistic, charming.
Very much so. The family had also recently moved to California from Illinois, which, that can sometimes add a layer of subtle stress for a young adult, even if they seem to be handling it just fine on the surface.
And for a while, it seemed like he was. He had a girlfriend, Kim Sly. He had close roommates like Sean Dixon. But then the sources all point to this really rapid shift in his behavior.
It wasn't a gradual slide. It was a sudden, very worrying downturn about 2 weeks before he disappeared.
So what did that look like?
Well, his friends, and especially Kim, they noticed he was becoming erratic. He started to withdraw socially, but the most alarming sign was his drinking. Sources indicate he was consuming just a tremendous amount of hard liquor. We're talking up to 2/5 per weekend. For a college student, that level of drinking, it really points to some serious self-medication or just a complete loss of control.
But it wasn't just the alcohol, was it? The self-medication went further.
It did. Our sources confirm that Bryce admitted to taking non-prescribed Vivance,
Which is an amphetamine often used for ADHD.
Exactly. A powerful stimulant. And he told people he was taking it to stay awake for these long video gaming sessions.
And this is where the technical analysis is so essential to understanding what happened to him.
It really is. You take heavy alcohol, which is a depressant, and you mix it with a powerful stimulant like Vivance, you're creating an incredibly volatile and unpredictable mental cocktail.
Plus, he's not sleeping.
Right. The severe sleep deprivation that would have come with that, it's just a direct pathway to what experts call stimulant-induced psychosis or, a severe manic episode.
And when we say psychosis here, we're not talking about something subtle. This isn't just feeling off.
No, not at all. We're talking severe paranoia, delusions, completely impaired judgment, a profound break from reality, and this is the background against which all of his final actions have to be judged.
Those actions, they read like a roadmap to self-destruction.
A textbook roadmap. On August 27th, he suddenly breaks up with his girlfriend, Kim, over a text message.
And he uses that classic chilling line that she would be better off without him.
It's just a massive warning sign. Severing a relationship like that, it's often something people do when they're in a deep crisis or even contemplating suicide.
It's like he's unburdening himself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the breakup. It felt like he was starting to liquidate his entire life. We see this so powerfully with him giving away his possessions.
He gives his Xbox, which was valuable, to his roommate, Sean Dixon, and then he gives him a pair of diamond earrings,
which were a significant gift from his mother, Karen.
The symbolism there is it's so profound. This isn't just decluttering. He's systematically cutting his ties to things that represent his future, his emotional attachments, those earrings, a gift from his mom. It's like he's severing that family tie before he makes his final move.
And then came the message to Sean Dixon. It's just a crystal clear emotional farewell.
It read, "I love you, bro. Seriously, you're the best person I've ever met. You saved my soul."
Wow.
When you add all of this up, the stimulant abuse, the extreme withdrawal, the emotional goodbyes, giving away his things, it's all just screaming distress.
And people heard it. His friends tried to intervene, which is one of the most tragic parts of this.
They really did. On August 28th, his roommate Sean calls Bryce's mother, Karen, and tells her how worried he is. Kim, his girlfriend, was so concerned she actually took his car keys away from him.
She tried to physically stop him from driving in that state.
Yes. And this is where we see the first signs of what we'll talk about later, the parental paradox. Karen Laspisa convinced Kim to give the keys back to Bryce.
So he leaves Rockland late that night, around 11:30 p.m., to start what should be a 7-hour drive home to Laguna Niguel.
And his last coherent statement to his mother before he leaves is that he had a lot to talk to you about.
And that one phrase,
Yeah.
it just hangs over this entire case, doesn't it? It suggests the real motivation for all the chaos that was about to unfold.
That 7-hour drive was supposed to be a straight shot home. Instead, it became this 30-hour odyssey of paralysis and just bizarre delays.
Okay, so the next morning, August 29th, he runs out of gas in a town called Buttonwillow in Kern County.
Which is already a red flag. I mean, you have a young man with money. He has a destination. Running out of gas suggests he's profoundly distracted or disorganized.
So roadside assistance gets called. A worker named Christian shows up with gas.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the key witness here.
He is. He described Bryce as lucid but quiet. So he seemed functional on the outside, but clearly shut down internally.
And then comes the part that is just. It's truly astonishing. The 13-hour wait.
After he gets the gas, Bryce just stays there, parked, in Buttonwillow, for about 13 hours.
13 hours. Christian, the roadside guy, he even checked on him again much later in the day and found him still sitting in the exact same spot.
Why? I mean, this period of time, it just points to a complete psychological paralysis. If you're so desperate to get home to have this big conversation you promised, why would you just sit for 13 hours when you're only 3 hours away from your destination?
There are a couple ways to look at that, right? Drawing on what experts say about stimulant crashes.
Yeah. After a long period of using a stimulant like Vivance and not sleeping, the crash that follows is often marked by this profound exhaustion, both physical and mental, plus intense depression or anxiety. So he may have literally been incapable of making himself drive, just trapped by his own degrading mental state.
But there's another theory, one that gets discussed a lot in the sources, especially tied to his substance use.
Right. The drug meetup.
The idea that he was waiting for a dealer. That he wasn't willing to move on until he got more drugs, either to stop the withdrawal or just to keep his manic state going.
And it's possible that the arrival of Christian, and then later the police, might have disrupted whatever meeting he was waiting for.
So law enforcement does eventually show up.
Yeah.
They find him, check on him.
They do a field sobriety test. They find him lucid and sober, and they basically just encourage him to drive home.
Which is another critical junction in this story. They confirmed he wasn't drunk, but a field sobriety test isn't going to detect deep psychological distress or, stimulant-induced mania.
So as far as the police were concerned, he was fine to drive. The last confirmed sighting of him actually moving is from Christian, the roadside worker. He saw him drive south onto the I-5 around 3 p.m. on August 29th.
Okay, so now we have this huge vacuum in the timeline. There's about 11 hours between 3 p.m. when he leaves Buttonwillow and 2:08 a.m. the next morning when he makes that final call near Castaic Lake.
And this should have been, a 3, maybe 4-hour drive at most?
At most. So where did he go? What was he doing during those 7+ hours that are totally unaccounted for?
That gap in time is it's immensely significant. If he had driven straight home, he would have been there by 7 p.m. at the latest.
So that extra time suggests a few things. Was he just driving aimlessly, still confused or paranoid?
It's possible. Or did he make other stops? Maybe he was trying to find that drug contact he missed in Buttonwillow, or just wandering around. The sources don't confirm any other stops, but the sheer length of the delay implies he was doing something other than just driving.
And we have to remember the context of the stimulants. Amphetamine abuse often leads to extreme paranoia, irrational behaviors.
Exactly. He could have been driving and pulling over repeatedly thinking he was being followed. Or maybe he just couldn't commit to getting to that final destination, to having that dreaded conversation with his mother.
So he eventually gets to the Castaic Lake area, which is still north of his home in Laguna Niguel.
Right. It suggests he finally recommitted to the drive only to hit this wall of exhaustion or maybe decision-making paralysis right before he crossed the finish line.
Which brings us to those final minutes and the crash scene itself. After all that time, he finally gets near home, makes that last critical call to his mother at 2:08 a.m., saying he's pulling over to sleep.
And just 3 hours later, the wreckage is found. And the physical evidence at that crash site, it's the most objective source we have, and it points very, very strongly to this being intentional.
So let's unpack the forensics in the crash, because this is what moves the whole case away from being just an accident.
Yeah.
How did they figure out it was intentional?
Well, the sources confirm that the traffic reconstruction analysis showed the accelerator was pressed all the way to the floor, not the brakes.
Right.
When a driver tries to stop or reacts to danger, they hit the brake. You get specific evidence, maybe skid marks, the crush damage is different. In Bryce's case, the car maintained maximum speed as it went off the road.
Which means it was a conscious, deliberate action. He accelerated off the road. It wasn't him just nodding off. It was a decision.
So we have what looks like a deliberate, violent attempt at self-harm that didn't work. Which brings us to the next puzzle piece, the egress. How did he get out of a wrecked SUV?
And why did he leave everything behind?
The evidence suggests he was actively trying to survive. The rear window of the Highlander was reportedly smashed or kicked out from the inside.
From the inside, that's a crucial detail.
It is. If he had been fatally injured or unconscious, he couldn't have done that. The act of kicking out the window implies he survived the initial impact and climbed out, probably through the back.
And the blood evidence supports that theory too, doesn't it?
Is it precisely? They only found a small, non-fatal amount of blood inside the car. This confirms he wasn't gravely injured at the scene. He was alive, he was able to walk, and he was functional enough to escape a wrecked vehicle.
Okay, so let's talk about the most symbolic part of this whole scene. The calculated abandonment of his identity. His wallet, his cell phone, his laptop. Everything that connects you to your life. He just left it there.
It's the ultimate statement of severance, isn't it? If he was just injured and walked away to get help, those items would be priceless. Leaving them behind. It indicates the goal wasn't self-preservation in the context of his current life. It was a complete break from it.
He made sure that when police or his family found that car, they'd have no way to immediately track him.
And then there's the speculation about his duffel bag. What do the sources say about what might have been taken from it?
Well, a lot of the online discussion, some reports that cite early police communications, they suggest that his duffel bag, which was in the car, had been rummaged through.
And that some contents were taken.
Right. And the speculation really focuses on three things. A burner phone, which would imply this is a planned disappearance. Drugs, which would imply self-medication or maybe a scheduled drop-off or a firearm. The idea that the crash was plan A for suicide, and he took plan B with him when he walked away.
So the overwhelming consensus from just analyzing the scene is that Bryce, in a state of profound mental crisis, attempted a fatal action, survived it, and then, instead of seeking help or re-engaging with his life, he actively walked away and abandoned his entire identity.
And that's where the trail goes cold. It's where we move from the facts of the scene into the realm of competing narratives.
The fact that the crash didn't kill him meant the search immediately shifted to the area around the lake, the massive parkland surrounding Castaic Lake.
And we're talking about an immense area. It's over 11,000 acres of parkland, and it's right next to the I-5, this major north-south corridor.
So was there any reliable indicator of where he went after he left the SUV?
Crucially, yes. This is the single strongest piece of objective evidence they have about his movements after the crash. The canine evidence.
The search dogs. Right. They tracked Bryce's scent directly from the crashed SUV. They followed it across a nearby bridge, and then the scent just ended abruptly at a nearby truck stop or gas station.
A truck stop. Okay, that is a highly significant place for a scent trail to end.
It confirms he was alive, he was walking, and he was actively moving toward a major transient corridor.
Yeah.
The I-5 is notorious for that kind of activity, hitchhiking, long-haul traffic.
So for the trail to just stop there, it suggests he got a ride or something else happened that eliminated his scent.
And that leads us directly into the three main competing narratives that have really defined the analysis of this case ever since.
So let's start with Theory A, suicide and remote death.
Yeah.
This theory is supported by everything he did before he left. Giving away possessions, the farewell text, and of course, the intentional car crash.
The psychological drive to end his life seems to have been clearly present based on all those warning signs. So if he survived the crash, the fact that he was uninjured but left all his ID behind, it suggests he failed at plan A and immediately moved on to execute plan B.
But why go to the truck stop if the goal was suicide? Why not just walk into the lake?
Well, the argument is that the crash itself would have drawn immediate attention. Emergency services were already on their way once the wreck was discovered.
So the trek to the truck stop was a way to get away from the scene.
A desperate move to complete his original intent somewhere else, away from the prying eyes. He might have hitched a ride to a more remote area deeper into that 11,000 acres of parkland to die unobserved.
Or the lake itself could still be the place. I mean, we know they did extensive diving searches.
They did. This is where we have to talk about the reality of the unfound body. This is always a really difficult concept for the public to grasp when suicide is the theory. People just assume a body has to surface.
And that's not always true.
It's not. In deep, cold bodies of water-like parts of Castaic Lake remains can sink and just stay submerged indefinitely.
Can you explain the science behind that? Why wouldn't a body float?
Sure. So the main reason a body floats during decomposition is the gas that's produced by bacteria breaking down organic matter. Methane, hydrogen sulfide. These gases fill the body cavities and increase buoyancy.
Like a balloon.
Exactly. But cold water, especially in deeper parts of a lake, significantly inhibits that bacterial action. Less bacteria means less gas production. If the water is cold enough, the body can just stay on the bottom or get trapped by currents or debris and never surface at all.
So even with all that searching, the fact that they didn't find remains doesn't rule out a remote death.
Not at all. Now let's pivot to Theory B, voluntary disappearance. This is the narrative that gained huge traction online, and it's fueled by the specific nature of what he left behind.
Leaving his wallet, his phone, his laptop. It's the ultimate commitment to going off-grid. He essentially wiped his digital and legal footprint clean the moment he walked away.
I mean, if your goal is just survival, those items are lifelines. But if your goal is to sever your identity, they're liabilities. And the scent trail ending at a truck stop, it strongly supports the idea that he was trying to hitch a ride or just blend into the transient community along the I-5, a conscious, clean break.
And this is where the social context from the sources comes in. The online speculation, especially on places like Reddit, it really focuses on the alleged helicopter or controlling nature of his parents.
Yeah, sources indicate that some people in the online communities believe Bryce felt this immense pressure from his parents, particularly about upholding a certain image.
So if he was grappling with these deep internal conflicts, maybe drug addiction, which his mother initially downplayed,
Mm.
or identity issues that he thought they wouldn't accept, running away becomes the ultimate act of liberation.
A final fuck you to that perceived control.
And this theory often points to the fact that law enforcement, at least according to some reports, eventually classified him as voluntarily missing.
And that classification is significant. Law enforcement usually comes to that conclusion when there's no clear evidence of foul play and the person has deliberately abandoned their means of communication and identification. Bryce's actions at the crash site fit that criteria perfectly.
So Theory B says the crash wasn't a suicide attempt, but a staged, violent climax designed to cut ties with the life he felt was suffocating him.
Exactly. But then we have to consider Theory C, a mental breakdown that led to him being extremely vulnerable. This one really integrates the psychology of the crisis with the very real dangers of the environment he walked into.
Right. Let's bring the psychosis factor back into this.
The consensus among many sources, especially the ones that focus on the medical and behavioral context, is that his erratic behavior was driven by the stimulant abuse and the severe sleep deprivation. We're talking maybe 36 hours awake, fueled by Vivance and depressed by alcohol. This isn't just a bad mood, it's a profound, dangerous impairment of judgment.
Which would make him an incredibly vulnerable target.
And he walks straight into a high-risk location, a truck stop. Truck stops on major corridors, like the I-5, are known hotspots, not just for transient people, but for bad actors. Drug dealers, traffickers, opportunistic predators. In a disoriented, panicked, or psychotic state, Bryce could have easily fallen victim to any number of dangers.
The idea that he was immediately looking for more drugs is pretty compelling, especially if you think his 13 hours in Buttonwillow was spent waiting for a dealer.
If he survived that crash, he might have been going into a severe stimulant crash or withdrawal. He'd be desperate for more substances to self-medicate. Walking to a truck stop to find a fix puts him in direct contact with criminal elements. He could have had an accidental overdose with someone who then panicked and disposed of his body.
Or he could have just met a predator who took advantage of his fragile state and made him disappear.
And that clean end to the canine trail. It supports the foul play scenario just as much as it supports a voluntary disappearance. A predator could have driven him away, or a hit and run could have happened just past the truck stop.
So, the lack of a body in this case suggests that whatever happened next, whether it was voluntary, accidental, or criminal, was done in a way that kept the remains far away from that initial search area.
It's just a very challenging case because the evidence abandoning his identity, the canine trail, the psychosis, it lends some credence to all three theories at the same time.
It really forces you to look beyond a single logistical answer and just accept the uncomfortable truth that a psychological collapse can lead to so many different tragic outcomes, and none of them give you that neat closure everyone wants.
Which brings us to the analysis, and we have to confront the one element that has been scrutinized more than any other, the thing that you, the listener, and the online communities come back to over and over again.
The parental paradox.
That's it. The most heavily burdened detail in the whole Laspisa case. Why did his parents, Karen and Michael, not drive the relatively short 3 hours to go get their son? They heard from his friends, Sean and Kim. They heard from a roadside mechanic, Christian. They even heard from the police who did the welfare check in Buttonwillow.
It seems, in hindsight, it seems incomprehensible. But we have to try and be impartial here and analyze the potential reasons for what seems like a tragic inaction.
There are a couple of competing explanations that get discussed. The first one is simple parental denial. Sources indicate that Karen Laspisa, in interviews, reportedly downplayed the severity of Bryce's substance abuse. She suggested he just dabbled like a normal college kid. And if you minimize or deny the addiction, you fundamentally minimize the crisis itself.
Right. So to them, maybe the strange behavior was just typical student stress, not a life-threatening mental breakdown. The urgency to intervene just wouldn't seem as high.
The second and equally tragic explanation is the idea that it was this calculated but catastrophically flawed effort to let him handle it, to avoid escalating the situation.
If their relationship was already strained by perceived control issues, them rushing to Buttonwillow might have just felt like an invasion to Bryce. It could have reinforced his desire to flee.
They might have really believed that letting him drive home, despite all the delays, was giving him the space he needed to approach that big conversation on his own terms.
But you can't deny the public sentiment. I mean, given all those red flags, the 13-hour stall, the friend scientific calls, the police check, it's so hard to overlook the feeling that they were relying on strangers to confirm their son was safe when they were just a short drive away.
It just highlights this critical, painful aspect of mental health crises in young adults. The parents struggle to balance intervention with independence, denial with acceptance, and in this situation, that balancing act was just tragically miscalculated.
And this brings us right back to the central emotional weight of the whole thing, the significance of what was left unspoken. Bryce told his mother he had a lot to talk to you about, and whether he chose to disappear or whether he met with foul play, the fact that that conversation never happened is the core tragedy here.
Investigators, online communities, they strongly believe that whatever was going to be said in that conversation holds the key to why he disappeared. What were the main theories about what he wanted to talk about?
Well, based on everything he did right before, the drugs, giving away his things, the theories really cluster into three areas. The first is the most obvious. He was going to admit he had a severe problem.
Disclose the full extent of his addiction, his mental health struggles, which he probably feared would be met with denial or shame or more control.
The second theory is that he's going to disclose something criminal. Was he in some kind of danger? Did he owe a drug dealer money? Had his behavior led him into a situation he needed to confess before it caught up to him?
The fear of legal trouble could absolutely fuel a desire to stage a disappearance.
And the third theory, which is often tied to the speculation about his home environment, is that he was going to reveal a profound identity issue. This speculation often centers on him struggling with his sexuality or his gender identity, something he believed his image-conscious parents would not accept.
Leading to an extreme choice of severance over confrontation.
Yeah. Any one of those topics could have been that final paralyzing weight. His 13 hours in Buttonwillow could easily be seen as just the immense anxiety over finally having to confront the truth of his life.
When we revisit cases like this, we so often focus on the logistics, where did he go? How far did he walk? And we completely miss the psychological reality.
Right. We have to remember that Bryce's actions were probably less about setting up a successful escape and more about a complete psychological disintegration.
That paralysis of action in Buttonwillow is the clearest sign of it. He wasn't thinking logically about the I-5 corridor. He was likely cycling through an intense stimulant crash, depression, or paralyzing anxiety.
But I do have one question about the psychosis link. If he was truly psychotic and disoriented, wouldn't he have been much more conspicuous after the crash? I mean, the K9 trail ending so cleanly at a truck stop, it suggests he had a moment of rational, if desperate, decision-making. He decided to get a ride.
That's a critical challenge to the theory. But we have to remember, psychosis doesn't always manifest as total, immediate incoherence. It often involves this heightened paranoia and delusion that can still drive logical, goal-oriented behavior.
Like what?
Like, I need to flee this scene, or I need to get to the nearest source of help, or drugs. Fleeing the car, abandoning the ID, and walking toward that transient hub. It can be a rational act motivated by a completely irrational internal state.
Which makes that vulnerability theory even stronger. His logic, as impaired as it was, directed him to the one place where he was most exposed.
And finally, let's just revisit the technical aspect of the unfound remains. We need to be absolutely clear with the listener about the reality of that search environment.
We've talked about the vastness of the parkland, 11,200 acres, and the effect of cold water on decomposition. What else do we miss when we just assume that bodies always turn up?
We miss the sheer difficulty of the terrain. The area around Castaic Lake is dense, it's rugged, it's prone to rapid natural overgrowth. Remains can be quickly obscured by nature, scattered by wildlife, or just hidden in ravines or thick brush that ground searchers, even with the best technology, can easily overlook.
And that's not even considering if foul play was involved.
Right. If a predator was involved, they would certainly choose a disposal location far, far away from the well-known search grid around that truck stop.
The emotional weight of this case, even all these years later, is just immense because it really encapsulates that agonizing lack of closure. You have this charismatic, artistic 19-year-old on the cusp of his sophomore year of college, just overwhelmed by substance abuse and this profound internal conflict.
And he consciously chose to jettison his life and identity. It forces us to confront that fine line between personal struggles and public tragedy. The fact that the end point, whatever it was, hinged on a difficult conversation that never took place. It makes Bryce's story eternally unresolved for everyone left behind and for us as observers.
It's the tragedy of lost potential, just made so much worse by the ambiguity of his final choice.
Bryce's story still lingers in the collective consciousness because it captures that moment when a young person spiraling from unaccepted mental health issues, made worse by severe stimulant abuse and sleep deprivation, consciously chose to sever every single physical and emotional tie to his established life. He didn't just disappear, he authored his own exit.
The question for you to consider is this. Given the overwhelming evidence of his mental deterioration, but also his precise, calculated choice to leave behind his phone, his wallet, and his laptop, if Bryce is alive and successfully living off-grid, what level of internal conflict or paranoia or just sheer dedication to severance must he still be experiencing to maintain that silence for so long? What kind of life is he living today, based on the crisis he faced more than a decade ago?
Next time on Threads of Truth, we investigate a disappearance that unfolded inside a secure workplace, the unsettling case of Dale Kerstetter.